Greetings. You can look at this video as a response, but I look at it as more of an addendum to a video called Monkeynomics 101 made by the Simian of Fecal matter Flung, sometimes known as the turd-flinging monkey. This is actually a very good channel. He makes excellent videos, well-constructed arguments, well-put-together videos, and he has a talent for concision that I sometimes lack. Also, he certainly seems to be of conservative bent, but he's not traditional, so he offers sort of different perspective than many other channels. I debated whether I wanted to officially endorse his channel, but let's consider this an unofficial endorsement because I vehemently disagree with him on one point that he and I have talked about in private. But nonetheless, I cannot deny that he makes excellent videos, high-quality videos, and I would certainly enjoin you to check out his channel. And as I said, this is not a response so much as an addendum to a video he made called Monkeynomics 101, and with a smattering of me addressing some other points he made in other videos. On a final note, directed directly to you, Simian of Fecal matter Flung, while it is true that both chimpanzees and monkeys, both New World monkeys and Old World monkeys, such as macaques in Old World or spider monkeys in New World, are primates, I find it a little bit problematic that you call yourself the turd-flinging monkey and yet pictorially represent yourself as a common chimpanzee. They are both anthropoids, of course, but they are vastly different. So I see a bit of inconsistency there, taxonomically speaking, and whether you choose to address that or not is up to you, but I, for consistency's sake, would represent myself as either a New World or an Old World monkey, as opposed to a higher primate such as a common chimpanzee, which you do. Just a suggestion. Personally, I would be bothered by it. Maybe you're not. Proceeding onwards, however. In your video, Monkeynomics 101, you make an excellent case for financial reasons as well as pragmatic reasons why one should go one's own way as a man. By the way, this gentleman, this is a very, very well done video, very good data, and the Simian of Fecal matter Flung clearly knows his maths and numbers. He talks primarily about three aspects of service that one can receive from a woman in a relationship or a marriage, namely sex, well-prepared meals, and cooking, that is cooking, and cleaning services. And then he goes into detail of how these could be substituted and still, in the end of the day, save money. But what I want to talk about in this video is what I like to call the unquantifiable liability. That video, and I'm not implying that you thought that, but the implication of the video, not the implication of what you're actually thinking, Simian of Fecal matter Flung, is that human beings, in particular males, are rational actors, when clearly, very often, we are not. Let's use another example from another video of yours. In another video of yours, a conflict of vision, I believe it's called. Don't quote me on it. I'll post a link to both videos in the description box. You talk about the government insistence of putting labels, nutritional labels, dietary information on food packages. Okay, and how this has done nothing to curb people's inclination towards becoming obese. And once again, people are not rational actors. And the funny thing is, I know this from firsthand experience. Sometimes I will go for days and very occasionally weeks eating food that I know is not nutritionally optimal, and then I punitively go through a ritual of cleansing involving high amounts of discipline and dietary punishment. Well, okay, I'm aware of these things. I've studied nutrition for a long time on my own, and yet I still engage in these irrational actions. What's to account for it? That's the subject of an entirely different video. I'm merely stating here that human beings are not rational actors in many cases. And the unquantifiable liability is something that we've talked about very often in separate occasions, Barros and I, and as well as, I believe, Spetsnaz. Things such as male-mother need, male validation, the need for validation, and in a much more general sense, the emotional needs of men that are ever present, for most men at least, and yet not met by the masses and certainly not by the external world, and only rarely met in their so-called intimate relationships. And that is the unquantifiable liability. The unquantifiable liability is that which drives man to engage in these relationships, pursue marriage, and so on and so forth. Yes, you have the reptile brain, the cerebellum, the brainstem, pushing men forward for the sake of reproduction. But at the end of the day, it is the limbic system, the region of the brain that regulates emotions and what have you, that is effectively putting men in their graves sometimes. A man commits suicide oftentimes in the aftermath of a divorce because of the emotional pain he experiences. Yes, of course, that's all compounded by financial loss, but it is the separation from that which he thought he belonged to at some point in time that turns then into a massive illusion, and always was illusory, that really gets him in the end. Another example, I've mentioned a friend of mine, although my friendship with him is waning, it seems, in Rhode Island, who periodically, or rather constantly on weekends, commutes several hours by train down to New York City to copulate with a female and who knows do what else. I imagine talk and eat dinner or what have you. Now, he makes a lot of money. There's no need for that. He could hire a high-quality escort if it were just about sex. Clearly, there's more going on to it than just that. And why? Emotional needs, male mother need, male validation, however you want to term it. Although ultimately all of this is a smorgasbord of all of those things, the unquantifiable liability is the thing that's going to get men every time with very few exceptions. And this is the reason for the necessity of talking about this, rehashing it, and bringing it up again and again. Men spend most of their lives hiding away from their feelings, their emotions, one, because the world at large won't accept that they even have them, but also for reasons of fear of being rejected. After all, men who show their feelings are seen as weak, effeminate, etc. They certainly don't show their feelings towards other men, but it's only within the confines of that sacred cow we call the human relationship or marriage, they're both the same thing more or less, that men feel, and the emphasis on feel, that they're finally safe enough to emote. But it's in that emoting that they find their downfall, because as Barbaros has pointed out very eloquently in the past, women despise quote-unquote weak men, and weakness coincides in the eyes of women with emoting, showing vulnerability. All the things that women claim they want, of course, they don't. Saying what they want is always something different from what they actually want, what the reptilian brain as well as the limbic system wants. Well, this is the unquantifiable liability. It's what gets men in the ass. It's what leads men to their downfall. It's what leads men down the path of destruction, sometimes annihilation in the form of suicide. You see, I reckon, Simian of Fecal Matter, Flung, that you, with your obvious talents for maths and numbers, in some hypothetical scenario where you had unlimited money and time, could put together a doctoral thesis covering, 40 industrialized countries with very precise and accurate data on all the things you talked about and much more, and we would still have the same problem. You might be able to reduce the problem slightly, but we would be essentially living in the same world with the same problem. And this is why it's so important to talk about these emotional things and the need to address them. Not necessarily suppress them, but understand them. And as a friend of mine said in my recent talk with him, emotions are a useful servant, but a terrible master. Avoiding talking about these things as the primary motivator, I think, and I believe it is, because, as I said, if the data these days are out there, most men know the cost of these things, and yet they're still pursuing relationships. I talked about this a while ago. For a long time, there was the notion in the MGTOW community, online community, that in some hypothetical world, if prostitution were, or not even hypothetical, in my state of Germany, the state of Germany I live in, prostitution is legal, that this would somehow serve as a substitute for conventional relationships and marriage, and it doesn't. It doesn't for the reasons I've cited. Men have a deep-seated need to be wanted, to feel validation, and to be accepted on their own terms. And the greatest need is, of course, to be accepted in those moments of weakness when he feels impotent. And I'm not referring to erectile dysfunction here, but impotent in the more abstract sense. That is, incapable of acting, incapable of influencing the world. When he sheds his tears, those are the moments that drive men ultimately to the arms of women, and the women see these events and these emotions and the act of emoting as weakness. It is a quote-unquote turnoff. And ultimately, as I said, this is what gets men in the ass. It is the unquantifiable liability. And until men learn this aspect of themselves and learn to acknowledge it as something that's present, suppression suppression is not a good means of acknowledging things because you're not acknowledging, you're suppressing it. It's quite a difference. But the problem is, of course, is you can't quantify it. It's not like the data you used in your video, Simian of Fecal matter, Flung. You can't present this in graphs. You just have to tell men that they have this. And most men, in my experience, they recognize this. And sometimes, even in going your own way, these feelings of need for validation or what have you, male mother need, are ever present, persistent. I mean, even Barbarossa has admitted in a video that his belief in how he deals with male mother need is that he is dominant in sexual intercourse, perhaps. Maybe that's his way. As for myself, I simply acknowledge it as something that was present, and the consequences of trying to address it tend to be far more destructive than the benefit. So I was actually able to assert rationality in this case. But for many men, that's simply not possible. We could do a worldwide study with data on everything you could imagine that would point to the benefits of going your own way and the negatives of divorce, of marriage and relationships and so on. And nothing would result of it because, once again, these emotional needs that men have would not be met. Now, I suppose you could argue you could simulate it with these, what are these cuddle clubs these days? You pay money to get cuddled by a woman. It's ludicrous. And I imagine that simulates it to some degree. But still, men would pursue these things. Now, your most recent video that I just watched was quite good, minus some grammatical errors. And it sounded something along the lines I have proposed in the past, something along of a business relationship. Now, once again, the problem here is the non-rational side of human beings. Human beings do not want to look at their relationships, particularly in the modern era of grand illusion, as merely a business contract, two sides of a bargain that need to be upheld by both parties. I mean, that's bland, it's unromantic, it ruins things, and I'm using all this in air quotes. It's a good idea. I would endorse it, although I wouldn't be a participant in that model. But once again, people aren't going to do that. And you seem to be, I'm a fan of Thomas Sowell, some of his arguments at least. You seem to be a fan of the sort of flawed nature of the human being idea or theory. And yeah, I think we're stuck with what we have. And part of being stuck with what we have is, one, the unquantifiable liability on the part of men's attachment to women and their need for relationships. And in a much more general sense, say in the model you recently proposed, just the inability of humans to make an emotional connection to some sort of contract, essentially, where both parties uphold both their ends. I'm not saying that it's impossible. There will be human beings, both men and women, who can form relationships on that basis, act them out, carry them out, and sing kumbaya together. Okay. I seriously doubt that would be representative of a majority. People like their cake, and they like to eat it too. People like the illusions that are woven around them, and the illusions that they weave around themselves. Now, call me a pessimist, call me a nihilist, call me whatever. I think the best way of addressing this at the end of the day, once again, is yes, let us use the numbers, but let us also address the unquantifiable liabilities that men have, and women have to a lesser degree. If anything, conquering the irrational, the becoming rather a master of your emotions rather than the servant of emotions, is probably the key to this problem, the key to the puzzle, the key to the door. It's not simply understanding the numbers, because, as I'll cite my friend again, this guy is an economic genius. He understands the numbers. Why is he still commuting every weekend down to New York City, ostensibly for the purposes of sex. No, there's something a lot more going on there than just getting laid. I mean, he could pay for a high-quality escort. We need to keep this in mind, bear this in mind going forward. One thing we can never forget is the unfortunate necessity of rehashing and readdressing this issue of male mother need, the need for validation, and the emotional needs and vulnerability of men that they refuse in public to acknowledge and probably don't even acknowledge themselves. And that's what gets them in all that trouble at the end of the day. They don't even know they have them. They don't understand their own male mother need. They don't understand their needs for validation. They don't understand their vulnerability, but they know it feels good to be in the arms of a woman. They know it feels good. It's that good feeling that they seek, right? And you can't quantify that. And I think we need to, as one half of the species, move past that, because this is not doing us any good. This is actually destroying some men. And we all have different solutions for dealing with this. I have my own. You probably have your own. We all have different ways. But let us not forget the unquantifiable liability. It's really what gets men in hot water at the end of the day. Anyway, thanks for watching. Consider my points about the anthropoid argument. I really think you should be consistent with your pictorial representations. And yeah, do subscribe to his channel, the Simian of Fecal Matter Flung. He makes good videos, well argued, well constructed, and concise and to the point, unlike mine. So everyone take care, and I shall see you soon, assuming I'm alive and healthy. Bye-bye.